wasn't something that I went into college saying, okay, I'm going to be a counselor. I actually entered college kind of unsure what I wanted to do. And then the first year I signed up for criminal justice. And my intention was I really wanted to be undercover. I wanted to be in the FBI. I wanted to be a special agent. And so I was learning as I went that like my counselor kind of steered me in the wrong direction. And I felt like I'm in the wrong major if I want to go in the FBI. I had met with someone who was a special agent, and she said, they're really looking for these other things like computer science, foreign language, law background, police background. And I just didn't think I wanted to be an officer. So I kind of panicked thinking, what am I going to do here? Loved psychology, still really loved the idea of the criminal justice background and just having that knowledge. But I actually had a friend who was going into a counseling program. He convinced me to look into the program I looked into, and I was able to quickly pivot and still get done in time to get into this master's program. Minored in criminal justice and psychology. So all those things kind of went hand in hand. In my second year in my master's, I ended up doing an internship in healthcare. And I worked in the county hospital in Cleveland in the trauma unit. And I absolutely fell in love. I loved that job. It was one of my favorite jobs. It was high paced. It was different every day. It was something that I felt like honored to be able to work with people at their worst moment. And also bringing in some of that counseling background. So I wasn't doing direct counseling, but it was more of a lot of crisis intervention, short-term counseling. I had the experience of being able to go to different units in the hospital, like the burn unit and the NICU, and have cases in there. So I got into healthcare, and I stayed in healthcare for 13 years. I worked in hospitals and mostly worked in dialysis clinics. After COVID, I was home with my kids until my youngest got to kindergarten, so I was home 5 years. And I thought, okay, I want to go back now, but I don't want to go back in healthcare with everything going on with COVID and just all the changes and stuff. And also because I knew I couldn't get the hours I needed. So I thought, okay, well, this is my time to go into counseling now. I'm married, I have health insurance, and I can make my own schedule. And now as a counselor, I feel like here I get to do the classes for court. So I'm working with people that are in the criminal justice system, and then recently getting my first responder certification so I can work with fire and police officers and other first responders. So it's like everything's kind of coming full circle. Yeah, so this was one thing I struggled with when I started, was this idea that coming in here as a brand new counselor, I had to keep reminding myself, I've had my license now since 2003, but I hadn't done it in this setting. So coming in here, I just felt very like inferior to somebody who's been doing therapy for like 10, 15 years. Initially, it was overwhelming, but then I kind of had to stop myself and say, no, you know what? You just need like 2 or 3 things that you're well versed at. And those are the 2 or 3 things that you're going to primarily utilize to work with people. And that's been really helpful, just kind of getting rid of that idea that I have to know everything and be like well-versed at everything, because I don't think it's possible to be well-versed at everything. So I kind of had to pick and choose, and like one certification I was really adamant about that I wanted was EMDR. So I did invest in that last year, year and a half ago, and got that certification. That has been very valuable. I love using that. Think of EMDR, we think of it for like extreme trauma, but really it's for any kind of trauma. Like they talk about little trauma and big trauma, and really all of our clients have some kind of trauma. We all have had trauma, right? So, you're thinking, why would I do this certification if you can only use it with trauma clients? I use it with all my clients. So really picking and getting certified in a couple things has been helpful, so that I feel like, okay, I'm really good at this, and this is what I'm going to use. And then like I'm doing DBT training next week. I'm doing it through Mindfully. I'm going to do that training. So I really want to learn that. So I think it's important to focus in one area and really just have your little like niche, so that you're not all over the place trying to treat every population, everybody that comes in with this problem, really finding the things that you want to focus on, whether it's marriage counseling or trauma or PTSD. That's been helpful for me. When I started here, I got a certification for a SAP counselor, which is also something very different. and it stands for Substance Abuse Professional, but we see clients who are mandated by DOT to go through a treatment program. So I don't do counseling with them, but I write up a treatment program. So this is anyone who gets a violation for substance use that's under DOT, so truck driver, pilot, train conductor, and they have to come in and they get a treatment plan and they have to go work the treatment plan, and then they come back for a follow-up. So it's a specific training and certification that you have to do. So I kind of have those couple things under my belt, and that's kind of just what I'm focused on in the court work, you know. I really didn't create this on my own. I basically just purchased books and basically got the material out of books. I'm really picking out the main points of those books because they were long, you know, entire books. One was like a 15-week class. So I'm just pulling out the main points and what I feel is important and going to be helpful for offenders to use the material going forward, so that they are able to make positive change in their lives. Any counselor can do it. You know, it's the basics. A lot of this stuff is stuff we're already doing. Like, for example, the domestic violence class, I find myself teaching a lot of concepts about marriage that we teach in marriage counseling to couples that are having disputes and disagreements. So it's all basic stuff that we know and learn as counselors. You're just putting it into a different format, so that it's more applicable to what this person is going through, whether it's an anger management issue, domestic violence. But again, like, we have clients that have anger issues that aren't court ordered that we are basically teaching this same material to. So it was just a matter of utilizing material that we already use and just kind of reformatting it for this population, and that's going to make it speak to them more in a more appropriate way. I guess just really giving people an opportunity to talk, you know, and not just talking at them and presenting material. For example, I had a guy today, and I feel like part of the class, it was just me and him with domestic violence. He was the only one, so I was able to spend more time chatting with him. I felt like he just really needed guidance, almost from a counseling perspective, you know, like he really wanted to talk about the problems he's having. So yeah, I taught the material, but then I feel like just kind of meeting him where he's at and figuring out what he needs, because each client has different needs and is coming from a different place. Everybody's situation was not the same, you know, so kind of trying to tailor it and not make it so generic that everyone's hearing the same material. Like, really trying to talk to them and find out, okay, what happened? Why are you here? Getting the story from them as best as they can tell it, you know, and obviously also keeping in mind that I may not be getting the whole story, but trying to tailor the material so that it meets their needs and what they're struggling with the most. You know, so sometimes you get someone for domestic violence and you realize there's a real anger problem here. So then you're pivoting and presenting more material that would be for an anger management client, for example. So I guess just recognizing that everybody's different and you cannot just teach everybody the same material. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Realizing also that these people have been through a horrible experience, and a lot of times, yes, it is their own fault, but they have been treated, in some situations have been treated very poorly. You know, they're dealing with police, probation officers, court, and nobody wants to hear what they have to say. It's just like, listen, you're here, you did this, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear your excuses. So I guess in one way it's also just allowing them to be heard and feeling like I'm not an enemy, like I'm here because I want to help you. I'm not your probation officer. I'm not going to talk down to you or treat you like you're less than human because you did something wrong, you know. So I think just respect, you know, the same respect that you would give a counseling client. And again, just keeping in mind that everyone's coming from a different place. Obviously, we are already licensed counselors. We can see anybody in counseling. So we could see fire, police, first responders. But a lot of police and fire departments want us to have this additional training, and it makes sense now, having gone through it and also having worked in the ER, that job that I had. Really, I did work with a lot of first responders, and there is a lot that you may not realize as a counselor when you are seeing someone who's a first responder, in terms of just what they go through, what they're exposed to, the level of trauma that they're exposed to. So the class is really meant to be eye-opening, to teach you and make you more aware of what it is that they go through on a daily basis, what their work-life balance looks like, things they struggle with. So it was a lot of course material, and then I did get to do a ride along with a police officer, which was really great experience. So I do feel more prepared now to see first responders in counseling. I feel like that was very helpful. It definitely gave me a little bit of a paradigm shift. There were things that I wasn't aware of course, that were kind of eye-opening. Like, you don't really realize the extent of the things that they have to deal with and go through and see. So it was a valuable training. I would definitely recommend it to someone who's thinking about seeing first responders in counseling. It was all done online, the coursework, and the exam was online. And then the ride-along, you just go to your local police department, and most police departments will take anybody on a ride-along if they want to, even if they just want to see what it's like. But it was about 250 hours of just being in front of the computer doing the coursework. One thing that I try to remind myself working with clients that's been helpful for me is just, and this is a concept that I think I learned in my master's program, and they teach every counselor, is like to meet the client where they are, and just keep in mind, like, you can't take someone further than they're willing to go. Because it can get very frustrating when you're like, I can really help this person, and if they come in this many times, and if we do this treatment, and then they don't show, or they stop coming, or, and so just keeping in mind, like, you can only take someone as far as they're willing to go, and it's really important to meet them where they are and what they're willing to work on, and how deep they're willing to dive into their stuff. You can't force anyone, so just kind of following their lead, but also pushing a little bit and challenging them, but remembering that you really have to follow their lead of what they're ready to talk about, what they're ready to dive into and willing to dive into. I think that's important in having success and in feeling like accomplished at the end of the day, and as if you made a difference, so that you're not like beating yourself up because like you couldn't accomplish this with this person. It's also remembering that they have to take responsibility too for their progress. It's not all on us.